Hello, friends, and hello, Janine. How are you today?
I'm good. Hey, Katie.
Oh boy. So we were supposed to record for a National Friendship Day, which was this first Sunday in August, but we both sort of had commitments and things didn't really work out. So we are here today. So we're going to mention National Friendship Day because really to us, National Friendship Day should be every day because we love our
Exactly.
friends so much.
That's right. That's right.
Um, and the topic for today is going to be life lessons learned because I think there's a lot that we can cover that really shows maturity and how we grow, and learning lessons always makes us better people, I think, in the end, as long as we take those lessons to heart and really use them when we make our next steps or choices. But I did want to read something because I think that it all kind of goes hand in hand with life lessons learning, or when you're in the learning mode. You have to be present. And this is a hard one for me where I feel like I'm always thinking about a million different things or being distracted, and being present really is the key. And I follow this guy on Facebook. His name is Dan Dapani, and he says, experiences with people and things you love become truly rewarding when we can be completely present while having those experiences. In order to be completely present, we need to be able to focus, learn to focus so you can be present. So those are really good things that I've learned. So maybe that's a life lesson right there.
Right.
Be focused and present.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to take a couple trips recently where I've had some beach time and some relaxation time and airplane time and just a lot of time to think. And, we were really talking about this as an opportunity for an episode to share some of these lessons with our audience. And and really how sometimes too the lessons that we do take from life, our friends are the ones that help us maybe see the lesson in the moment, right? Sometimes we can't even
Mhm.
see the lesson that's there. And also, some of the way we enhance our friendships is by sharing what we've learned with our friends, right? So there's a lot of this benefit that we felt could come from talking about these things that we've learned to share with others. So we're just going to hop right in. We each brought to the table today 5 of our own life lessons and stories that we have to go with those. So I'll throw out the first one, and I'll make it a G rated, but it's really to let that stuff. You might put another S word in there, but then we don't have to, check the explicit the box on the podcast that we have bad
Oh,
words. So let that stuff go. And what I mean by that is, there's been times in my life, and particularly, when my marriage ended, and maybe my ex wasn't necessarily doing things that or acting in ways that people thought they had their story of how I should respond to his actions.
yes.
I
Hmm.
just chose to let that stuff go in the sense of I didn't want to pollute myself with negative energy around certain things. It just wasn't worth it, right? I'd made a decision, we'd made a choice to end things and move on. And so that was enough for me in some cases. And I know some people around me, friends and family, had a hard time understanding sometimes my approach, like, wanting me to maybe act out or do something. And I just, over time, and it reinforced itself with me over time that choosing to let stuff go really was the healthiest thing that I could do for myself, and for, by extension, for Connor too, right? Because I was always trying to preserve the family relationship, and always trying to preserve for Connor his father and their relationship. And so I
Right.
often chose, people might say, oh, I chose the high road, and I wasn't trying to be righteous or anything like that, but it was really about, I knew if I held on to some of that negativity, that it would just eat me from the inside out. And so that was a really, really significant life lesson that I've taken. It was rooted in that. And that's been over, gosh, 14 years ago now. And there's been many instances since then in all sorts of different scenarios where I just say to myself, I'm going to let that go and then move on.
But that takes practice. I mean,
Yes.
so I think that you need to. So at what point did you realize, oh my God, I have to let this stuff go? I mean, because there's like a kind of a double lesson there, right? You know,
Yeah.
because it takes practice.
Yeah. Right. Well, and it is, you do have to, when you're learning anything, right, not beat yourself up when you fall down or don't do it well, right? Because you can know you need to
Yes.
let that go. And, you know, there were many times when maybe I didn't. I mean, I can think of one time in particular that, and it was when this was later. So I had taken this lesson to heart for probably almost 9 or 10 years. But in a moment, I was so angry, and he was really quite ill and had been going through some very, you know, difficult chemo treatments, um, and I, you know, kind of pushed on an issue, that now I, you know, looking back, I'm like, that's a time I wish I had practiced this lesson that I didn't, right?
Hmm.
And, you know, in the end, I was the one that suffered more from it, right? Like I just wasn't the right time situation to do that.
Right.
And in the end, I mean, I did have to let the situation go. It was what it was. Like it was a time when there wasn't changing, nothing was going to change. Like he had done what he'd done and it was done. That
Right.
was like
Yeah. Yeah.
making a point about how I didn't agree with that wasn't really helpful to him. And certainly wasn't helpful to me either.
I
So
think that's a big one. I
yeah,
have a hard time with that one. Things tend to ruminate with me. I have a really hard time stepping away and letting things go.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
always
mean,
have
and I
to
think a lot
practice.
of people do. And you know, and certainly just because I know this is an important lesson doesn't mean I'm perfect at it either, right? Like constantly. And I find it a lot now with Connor, right? Like there's with your kids, you we're in this transitional kind of relationship, right? When they moving towards adulthood, and what do you, how hard do you push as a parent, and where do you kind of parent from
Hmm.
the edge, and this is a big one right now too, where I have to let just certain things go because it's not my
Yep.
choice, it's not my decision anymore, and
Hmm.
I need to allow him the space to figure his lessons out ultimately,
Right.
right? So
Because
yeah,
we really don't learn the lesson if somebody tells it to
right,
us.
right,
It's like we have to walk through the fire ourselves to really implant it in the brain.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
definitely.
I think for me, one of my biggest lessons is always trust your gut.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
that sixth sense, it's your intuitive side. And I feel like it's the little angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. And that devil's like, do it, do it, do it. You know, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's when you go against your gut, at least for me personally, it never fails that it was like, oh my gosh, I live to regret it.
Mhm.
Um, it's a hard one. And then one thing I always say too, that, you know, truth rings true. So when you say something or you're following your truth and following your gut, you know it. So why
Yeah,
do we fight it so much? That's the thing.
right.
Why do we fight it so much? I think
Yeah,
sometimes just because we want something, knowing that it's bad for us.
right, right.
But that,
Well, and I think sometimes too, we don't follow our gut because we're conforming to what other people are saying that we should be doing or not doing, right? Also, so it's like we don't listen to ourselves because we're listening to others, and whether that's, you know, people in our
mhm,
closest circles or really far out from us, like in some social media group, you know, that we're
yeah, good point.
hearing these messages that take us away from what is our kind of true knowing, right? Like we know, and that yet we're influenced, right? They don't call people influencers for no reason, right? Because
Right.
they to influence our decisions, and so
Yes.
really keeping that gut in check. And you know, the other thing too, Katie, is like I know a lot of people that are very kind of left brain, logic focused, who really have a hard time with this, right? Because they want to ground everything in facts and data and information. And
Mhm.
that stuff's important, but there's more to our decision making than just what's in black and white. And so, um, like you were saying before too, like tapping into that, practicing, at least even asking ourselves the question, like, how am I, what is my feeling in my body on this, right? Like that's literally part of them, and that's where that kind of saying comes from, right? Like,
Right. Well, and the sleep on it. Let me sleep on it.
yeah,
Because usually if you don't make a, you know, instant decision or reaction, if you really have the time to sit, usually the answer will bubble to the surface, the correct answer.
right.
then it's following through with it, right?
Yeah.
Not fighting yourself like, oh my gosh, but this is the truth and this is what I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, what else you got?
Well, so a lesson that, and I learned this, or kind of really started to recognize it, I should say, right? Like we're always continuing to learn, but I recognized this in my late 20s. And it's that I can do hard things. And
I love that. Love
it
that.
is so, I go back to that core moment experience that taught me that. And as I've proceeded through my life in the decades since, I often just say that to myself, like, I can do this because I know I've done hard things in the past. And so, and I don't even remember if I've told the story here, but it's rooted in the fact that I did this really hard physical thing, right? That water ski race from Long Beach to
Yes,
Catalina and back.
right.
So, over 60 miles, very physically challenging, and trained for 9 months. And when I went across the finish line with my friend, and this was something I had a shared experience with my friend Karen, when we crossed that finish line, we were behind the boat together. It was an awesome feeling. But what I didn't know at the moment was how often I would go back to that moment of, like, I did something really hard that very few people in the whole wide world have ever even attempted,
Right.
completed. And so how that's translated for me, though, is when I was, early in my career, when I was maybe going after, a promotion that was kind of seemed out of reach, or, later when I had to make decisions to leave a relationship, or now in as my, the decision to start a business back in '08, and now the decision to write a book. These are all hard things that I just remind myself that, like, I can do hard things. And then, there are ways that techniques or things to do to help you when something's hard, right? And it, depending what it is, if it's more emotionally hard, it's seeking out friends to listen and be sounding boards for you. And if it's hard in the sense of just trying something new, it's still seeking advice from other people, knowing that you're the beginner, it's going to go slower at first. So I draw all these kind of connections, but the core lesson for me is just knowing that, I can do hard things.
Right.
And I think it's helped to show other people too, that I think particularly in my business realm anyways, I have a lot of other friends and colleagues that worked in a corporation who seen my success in starting my business. Now I'm helping them and mentoring them and helping them start businesses. And so knowing that my doing hard things also helps other people know they can do hard things, is something that I'm really grateful for, that I'm and proud of. I guess that's not a bad thing to say.
Yeah. Well, and sort of, this isn't on my list of my 5, but piggybacking on that, because it really is a lesson as well. Like, don't let fear be the control factor, because I know fear keeps people in little tiny spaces where you're not growing. And we have really good friends that we love dearly, but their whole life has been choices based on fear of the future. If we do X, Y, and Z, and they're very stable and they're very secure and they're very conservative. But the thing I think that they're missing is, when you face fear and push beyond it and knowing that you can do hard things, right? I think that you're sort of keeping yourself from really experiencing like passion and joy, and because fear is a control factor for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And I think that that's a good one to
It's
push
a dream
beyond.
killer is what it is, right?
Yes.
People play small because they're afraid, right? And even when people are experiencing, success in their life and so forth, there still can be fear of being too successful, right? Like, so it's fear,
Right.
and our kind of our limiting beliefs, they creep up all the time for us.
Yes.
And again, when you're focused and present, like you talked about in your first lesson, you can catch fear and name it for what it is, and then put it aside and kind of take that step into the unknown, or the beyond the fear and the trying of whatever it is. And I just, one of the things that I do is I just say to myself, like, what's the worst thing that could happen if I try this, right? Like,
Right.
what's the worst thing if I write this book and nobody wants to read it? That's not even,
Right.
maybe I've
Right.
just spent time doing something that I still got something out of.
Right.
Right. So
Exactly.
I don't need to, send or sell 10 million copies for it to be a success. Just to go through the process has been, already to this point for me, it's enhanced my personal life experience, right? Like it's helping me continue to grow and be challenged. And I've made new friends because of it. I was in, I'm in a little like writers group of people that I didn't know before. And so it's just another enhancement, but fear holds us back. And again, you and I have plenty of our own fears that get in the way all the time.
Oh.
And I, this is for me, as you would think, I mean, I know you know better because your kids are even older than mine, that parenting somehow would get easier, but it doesn't. And I feel like my fears and my worries around, my son are just growing as he's growing. I'm like, oh, I don't want, and so
Right.
that's something I'm really working on right now. I'm trying to just let that, and that goes back to, I got to let it go.
Yes, you do. You're going to loop back on that one.
I think it's going to keep happening. Exactly. All right. What do you got next?
One that, because I'm such an impatient person, I like everything to flow and happen quickly, is I've learned to embrace what I call divine delays or a divine detour. So rush in the morning. I have to be at the office by 8:30. Oh my God, I leave the house and I forget my phone, or I forget my lunch, or I forget something. And I'm like,
Yeah.
turn around. But in my head, I'm thinking, okay, it's a divine delay. So maybe, and again, I kind of put it out to the universe, like maybe there's a force that's sending me back home, so I avoid an accident, or I avoid something bad happening. So and it really is sort of an internal shift as well. When you look at it, instead of this big, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot this and now I'm wasting time, but like, oh, this is a divine delay, or this is a divine detour that's taking me a few extra minutes. And maybe again, this is looping back to the being focused and being present.
Yeah. Right.
And this is something that I've only just begun doing, I would say, in the last year or two, because I just before would just forge ahead into this frustration instead of accepting it, like, okay, just accept this divine delay.
Well, and that skill of reframing a situation, right? Like, because we always have a choice on how we react in a situation. So, right. So when you forget the whatever, you have the choice to get even more agitated and aggravated over it, which then could cause you, maybe when you turn around, you run a stop sign and then you get in an accident and then you're really delayed, right? Like, as opposed to just, oh, okay. And you pass some cute little family riding their bikes to school and it makes you smile. Like, you wouldn't have seen that little spark of joy if you hadn't turned around, right? So so much of it is how we perceive the situation, and we get to choose that, every moment of every day. And so, a bad thing can turn into, if nothing else, it's neutral, right? It's not even good or bad, but it's just kind of neutral. Like, I gotta turn around and I'll get to work when I get there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love the phrasing that you put on that, though, like the divine detour, and it is, I believe that too, that sometimes, we're getting these messages kind of from the universe about something, and other times, where it's just us being in a rush and forgetting crap and we got to go back. So.
Right. Right.
That, yeah. Well, and
Next
for me,
step.
this next lesson really, I think, was rooted in when I did my yoga teacher training, over 10 years ago now. And I didn't know it when I signed up for this. I just thought I was going to learn how to do these poses the correct way, anatomically, but there's so much to yoga and so much to study, and so much is about kind of philosophy. And one of the things that we learned is that the reason that we all suffer, fear is a pain for us, but we suffer because we're attached to things, right? And if we can let go of that attachment, we will suffer less. And the lesson here that I want to share, though, is that nothing, good or bad, is permanent, right? Nothing is forever. And I'm a super optimistic person by nature, and yet understanding that helps me to your point, to be more present in the moment when I'm feeling happiness or joy, because it's not gonna, even that, those sensations or those feelings don't last even 24 hours. Do you know what I mean? Like your
Right.
whole day is
Yes.
ebbing and flowing with emotion. And, but you know, when you're having a difficult time and something is happening, it's not going to last forever. You will get through it. And so, you know, right now I've got family members that are moving, which is always disruptive, right? Selling a home and moving, and so many decisions that are going with it. And I suggested that instead of ruminating and worrying about 10 steps out, like just think of each decision as this is the decision for now, right? It's not
Yes.
forever. It's not a forever decision.
Right.
And we do tend to sometimes place more value on our decisions, and that they're more permanent. And again, trust me, I'm very thoughtful when I make decisions, but it's okay to know that things are not permanent, right? This idea of impermanence is also very much rooted in a lot of the yoga teaching. And it really stuck with me because I could see it in my own life, times where I was really, you know, and back to my marriage, you know, they say people are coming into our lives for reasons. And my ex was probably one of my biggest teachers, right? That I really did learn a lot
I would
from
say.
our shared experience and our shared life together. And you know, if people can maybe walk away from our podcast today with all of these lessons and that idea that like tomorrow's a new day, it's going to be different, it can be better, you know, our situations that we find ourselves in are always ever changing. And that just allowed me to kind of take a deep breath in my life. And then now, you know, more situationally, I can do that in a more, you know, again, practiced way, as we talked about.
Right. Right. Um, well, next for me is to learn from regrets.
Mm.
And I like to think that I don't live a life of regretting things, but there are some things. And again, I feel like some of my lessons are sort of interwoven. And one of them was I listened to my gut to not listen to my gut. And I'll explain. I was on a business trip in Seattle, and my grandma Helen had fallen a couple of days before I left, and she wasn't doing very well. And I was on this business trip, and I had this feeling. I thought, you know what? You need to get home. You need to get home early.
Mm.
So I cut the business trip short by, you know, a day and a half or something. And I got back to California, and I thought I was running late. And I thought, I'm not, instead of swinging by to see her, and it would have been like 5, 6, 7 o'clock something, I thought, I'll just go tomorrow.
Mm.
Well, there wasn't a tomorrow. At 5 a.m. the next morning, my parents are knocking on my door saying she passed away last night. And so that is like, whoa, heavy for me, because I thought I left a trip early because a gut feeling said, you got to get there. And then I didn't listen to it. So that's one for me that I've really tried to let go of, let that
Yeah,
go, right?
yeah, right,
Knowing that she wouldn't be mad at me or whatever, but you
right.
know, I had the instinct and then I didn't follow through with it.
Mm. Yeah,
So that one's tough. That one's
yeah,
tough. So I would just really advise people, like when you have this moment of feeling something very strongly,
yeah,
just to follow through,
yeah, right, right.
you know?
Yeah, I that's back to your gut thing too, right? That's
Yep.
interesting, really
Yep.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, and there's a couple of different times where just traveling, and I just thought, you know, another part of the lesson could be sometimes you just have to say yes to things.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know, just say yes. I had gone to a seminar, and this darling little gal says, just say yes. Like her grandmother had always said that to her. And, you know, a couple of times just traveling. I remember being in Paris on this beautiful 5-day layover, and there was a girl on the trip with me, and she was going to go to Monet's garden in Giverny. And she's like, do you want to come? And I remember it was like, okay, late 80s, right? This
Right.
trip would have cost me 125 or
Wow.
$150. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to put that on my credit card. I'm like, oh, I can't do it. I'm
Yeah.
like, why didn't I just do it? Because you
Yeah.
know, will I get the chance again? Maybe.
Yeah.
It's like, dang it.
Yeah. I know.
I should have just said yes.
I know when my friend Valerie, she a long time ago, she's got two kids that are, you know, pretty well grown now as well. But she said, you know, someone told her, I don't know where it came from, but to like whenever you could as a parent, say yes, because we say no a lot as a parent. There's a lot of no.
Yes,
There's a
that's a
lot of no
great piece
language.
of advice. Yes.
Like, whenever possible, say yes to your kids. And she's, not being overly indulgent even. It's just, there's a lot of times when our immediate tendency would to be say no. And it's like, yeah, go ahead and roll down the hill, right? Whatever. It doesn't matter if you're going to get grassy and dirty,
Right.
all this stuff. I'll wash the clothes. So, well, that makes me think of my next lesson too, in the sense of, saying yes, but then this idea of asking for what you want, right? That I think this is even more a little bit of a female driven lesson that we don't learn maybe as early as we should or could. That, so from a professional standpoint, it's like, you've got to advocate for yourself. And if you want a flexible work schedule, or you want a raise, or you want a promotion, like, you've got to ask for what you want. People, they're not just going to hand it to you on a platter. And, there's a mindset of like, well, if I do good work and I work hard, people are going to notice, and then they're going to give me the promotion or the recognition or whatever. And that's not the way you get it done, right? So
Right.
for
Right.
me,
Well, they'll just think, oh, she's fine. She
yeah,
hasn't asked for anything. She's fine.
right. And, and there's all sorts of these like unconscious bias that come into play, right? My boss could have, this is hypothetical because my boss was a female and didn't look at me this way, but say I had a boss that just that, oh, well, she's married and she started a family, and she's not going to want this promotion, right? They could have that bias and not even consider me. So asking what you want. And then on the flip side of that, in a fun way, and I want to give a shout out to my friend Linda here, who taught me this part of the lesson from a personal side of, when you're, every time she was very much an experience-based person. We did a lot of things that she would get something lined up and say, hey, you want to go? And I would say yes, and I would go. And then we would get there, and then she would be like asking, if we could get backstage to meet somebody or do something like out of the ordinary with this, like we're in a cool situation in the first place, but she would always like, kind of ask for stuff. And I would be like, are you really asking that? And I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, we got what she was asking for. And I got to like ride her coattails and get backstage.
That's awesome.
Or meet the cool person or whatever it was. And so really grateful for learning that. And then in a small way, how that translates too is, we were just on vacation and, in Hawaii, in a beautiful setting. And, you're at these places where there's still like the premium tables, right? The tables that are right on the water or the sand or whatever. And then there's the tables that are in the back. Someone's got to sit there. But I've just started to like request, if possible, what it is I really want in the situation. If I really want to sit in that table, like what would it take? Or if I really want to participate or do something that, isn't kind of the normal course of what's going on. All the worst I can say is no, like, no, you're in the back, you didn't make a reservation. Okay. Or, no, I don't think so. But so that's been, I think, an important one too, because again, depending on our conditioning and our upbringing and how we think about, like, because I'm a rule follower, right? That's why it felt uncomfortable with Linda sometimes.
Sure.
Because I'd be like, oh, that's not the way that's supposed to go.
That's right.
Like so many cool, fun experiences came from that. And then on the professional side, they're just, huge, that I know so many very successful people who still struggle with like articulating and asking for what it is that they want, from their work situation. So I would
Well, I have a good story to top that with. When I was working at the magnet factory in Sonoma, which I love, it was such a great job. It gets to a point where, you can't keep getting raises.
Yeah.
But I remember at one point, in lieu of a raise, I said, well, same salary, can I have a day off during the week to spend with my son? And they're like, oh my God, of course, very family oriented company. It was the owner, and then his daughter was my boss. But I'll remember that because Cameron was little. And so they had a day during the week, I believe it was on Wednesdays, where they only had school till noon. So that was my off day. And I would always pick him up and we would go get French fries, or we would go to the park, or we would do fun things. And like that time, you can always make more money, but you can't make more time. And I am so appreciative of them just for really thinking outside the box to offer that to the employee. So kudos to them.
That is awesome, because it's not always about money, even in the work situation, right?
Right.
And when you have kids and you have, because that's, part of the reason I stayed at my job for 18 years was because they had all sorts of those sorts of opportunities. And same thing when Connor was young, I was able to work a 4-day work week, and I did the same things, where you do this stuff, you're not running errands and grocery shopping and doing laundry. It's like we would go, of course, living in Southern California, I got that Disney pass, and we'd go to Disney for like 2 hours, ride 2 rides, and then go home because he was young.
Oh,
He was
that's
little,
excellent.
and we just need to speak up for things that would
We need to ask.
be important to us. Yep.
We need to ask.
Yep.
All right. Well, I have my last lesson here, and I think it's probably one of the biggest for me, is that you're never too old to learn a lesson. And kind of the backstory for me is I just remember, turning 50, and we were on that great trip in the, British Virgin Islands. I'm not kidding. My 50th birthday day is probably one of the best days of my life. I mean, it was really just a fantastic day. And I remember thinking, I'm 50, I got this, no more lessons, but it was so stupid, right? And about that time, after that, we had Hurricane Irma hit Florida, which we've never had a hurricane before. And it was like the 100-year storm, and it was awful. And, when people talk about PTSD after something, I'd be thinking, they're such wimps. Well, I totally had that.
Yeah.
And then there was a family thing going on, and it was like a trifecta, like 3 big things kind of hit me. And I thought, oh my God, we are always learning. This is a big lesson for me. It's like, don't think that you're done just because you've turned a certain age. And I actually ended up going and seeing a counselor, and she helped me, with a lot of things that stemmed back from my younger childhood life.
Yeah.
And then I'm all of a sudden rooting through all of these early issues that I didn't even really know I had. I'm like, oh shit, I'm just a disaster, but work in progress, not perfection, right? So
right.
I think that was the biggest for me, and it was just a couple years ago. So, lessons just keep coming. We just have to be open to them.
Right. And you figure like, okay, we are in our 50s and could easily live another 30, 40 years. Like that's a lot of lesson time to,
right.
to practice the ones we already know of.
Yes.
And there will be more. So that is important to remember for all of us. And that it's okay to be learning and we are not perfect. To the day, I think we're 6 feet under, we're a work in progress,
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And so
absolutely.
my last one is, it's a little bit cliche, but it for me is very true. And it informs how I personally live. And it's this idea that, money doesn't buy happiness. And now I understand that I have always had enough money in my life, right, as a child and now as an adult. But I have seen the pursuit of financial success over the pursuit of a happy life. And, with my dad, had everything he could have wanted, but, I think didn't always enjoy what he had. And also, same thing with Todd, that, the bigger house, the bigger, faster car, the bigger boat, all of that pursuing of those things doesn't equate to happiness. And that's not just with these 2 men in my life, right? This is, I think, a rampant particularly in Western culture, for sure, in the United States, where we're always thinking that when I get the next thing, then I'll be happy, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
And you get there and you're like, I don't feel any happier than I did yesterday. So what's the deal? And so it's really shifting my own thinking around what a fulfilling, happy life is, and that it's not necessarily rooted in, the next highest achievement of whatever it is that you're going for. And I went through a period of scaling, back in a lot of ways, from a financial perspective, like going from the, 3,000 square foot house to the 2,000 square foot house to the 1,200 square foot house, and seeing that arc actually equated to me being happier than less happy, right?
Well, you have less to worry about.
Yeah.
But it's yeah.
And freeing up resources for different things, right? Like, so then I could take and spend resources on a trip with you and the other friends on our 50th. And like, that was more important to me than driving the newest, fastest, Mercedes or whatever people drive. Right. Like I drove a little Kia. I could have afforded to have a nicer car, but it wasn't important to me. My little Kia was a workhorse and got me where I needed to go and allowed me to not be stressed out, about, I've got $1,000 car payment or something crazy. So the whole relationship that we all have with money is really complicated for a lot of us. And so I think some of our lessons, people will have their own kind of different lessons around money. But for me, it's just, it's not the end all, right? And it's not what leads you to happiness. And there are plenty
of happiness isn't a place. Like, oh, if I move here or I have this, then happiness will come. It has to come from the inside first. And that's a long, hard lesson for a lot of people.
And to kind of, for us to loop in our show here, a big part of joy and happiness in our lives are rooted in those close connections, those relationships, those friendships, right? That we nurture and that we pay attention to and that we make time for. And that to me is much more worthwhile than, kind of pursuing the next big thing, whatever that is.
Right.
Is that our 10? You have one more.
No, that's our 10, but I am going to read like a little quote because it kind of goes with my last lesson, that we're never too old to learn that, from Mark Twain. He says, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than the ones you did do. So throw off the bow line, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover.
Yeah.
See, we have to keep always finding joy in our life, finding new ways to bring joy into our life.
Yeah.
And I know you wanted to close with something special.
I did. Too. I wanted to dedicate our episode today to my friend Beth Frechtenach. We met in 1985 at UC Santa Barbara, met in the dorm, and we went on to live together for all 4 of our years there at that special place. And I got some really hard news this past week that she had passed away on August 11th after being diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And she leaves behind a loving husband and 2 children, ages 13 and 15. And when you talk about moments to reflect on life and lessons, my hearing of her passing really gave me pause to do that and helped kind of add to this episode overall. And while it's a really great example of friendship too, where we didn't see each other in this kind of second half of our lives very much, but we spent these formative years together, and I have so many awesome memories, and many of them, we had lots of stories of things that we did together. But I was sharing earlier with Katie before we got on that when I was recalling my time with Beth, it was really a lot of the little small daily moments, because we did live together, sitting around what was the kitchen table, which mostly was the table that we studied at, walking down to the beach, sitting out on the lounge chairs and we didn't really even have a yard, but somehow we made a place to sunbathe, all those little times that we had together. And I really cherished them and our friendship. And, it hit me in the gut of like, oh, wow, I should have been better about reaching out in these later years. But in my heart, she's always remained my friends. She wasn't like, I wasn't not friends with her anymore just because I didn't see her, right? Like in my heart. And the ironic part was just the days before her passing, I was with our other roommate and friend from college, Sherry, in Hawaii together. And we were reminiscing about all sorts of our time together and had talked at length about Beth and different memories with her. And then a few days after getting back, I got that message. And so I do want to dedicate this to Beth and to all the friends that that we lose along the way. It's heartbreaking, but to have those people in our lives, and then we are part of what helps sustain their memory too, right? And so I think my intention, I'll put it out there, is to actually write a letter to her husband and her kids who don't really know me, about their mom and how she was and who she was at that point in her life when they didn't know her. Even her husband didn't know her.
think that's fantastic.
So that's something that I'm
So
excited
3
to
cheers to Beth.
do. All right.
3 cheers to Beth.
Well, we're excited to let you guys know our next podcast will be one that we're going to record when we're in the same physical space up in Northern California.
Stand it.
So looking forward to recording that and
Oh.
sharing that experience with all of our listeners. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in.